Hey, it's Tom here and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video I want to cover the latest update on Phil Town's Rule 1 fund portfolio. Now unlike many of the investors that I follow like Monish Pabrai or Guy Spear or Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, Phil Town's Rule 1 fund doesn't file a traditional 13F filing like those investors. So it does make the portfolio updates for Phil Town notoriously difficult to find. They're sort of filed under this World Funds Trust banner. They don't necessarily have their own like 13F filing like those other investors. And the actual filings that show up on the SEC are basically, as far as I know, at least the only place you can actually see the data for Phil Town's fund. So with 13Fs for Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and so on, there's usually a lot of third-party websites that can basically pull that data from the SEC and then compare it against previous SEC filings so that we can see if a holding is new or if one's disappeared or if it's been added to or trimmed or something like that. But that's not something that's possible with Phil Town's portfolio. So I've had to kind of extract some of the data, throw it into a spreadsheet and do some numbers that way. But there are a couple of interesting things that show up in Phil Town's portfolio that we actually don't see in a traditional 13F. So for example, we don't just see the direct stock investments like we do in a 13F. With Phil Town's Rule 1 fund, we actually also get to see the current cash position. And interestingly, we can also see Phil Town's use of options. So Phil Town in this latest portfolio update lists some put options that he's written and call options that he's written as well. And that gives us a feel for some of the companies that he's potentially interested in that aren't necessarily in his portfolio yet, or maybe companies that are in his portfolio, but it also gives us strike prices at which he might be interested in buying more. So in this video, we will cover basically two things. We'll look at the core stock holdings and portfolio for Phil Town. We'll see if he's bought any stocks, if he's sold any stocks, and what the current kind of allocations look like in the portfolio. And then we will also take a look at his current options positions so that you can see what he's up to in that department as well. Now, if by any chance you do want to view the kind of ugly original data, I'll leave a link to the SEC filing down in the description below. It's all publicly available information, so you're welcome to click on that link and go check that out if you're interested as well. But without further ado, let's get straight into this portfolio update, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, so when we first take a high-level view, kind of look at this portfolio, there's one thing that really jumps out at you, and this is something that should have jumped out at you at any other basically Phil Town portfolio update video you might have watched, and that is that Phil Town continues to have a really large cash allocation in his portfolio. And just so you can get a feel for the actual numbers that I'm presenting in this video, basically all the share counts that we get in Phil Town's portfolio as of the end of September, I've gone through and assumed that obviously the share counts haven't changed since then because that's the latest data we have, but I have updated the prices of each of these stocks in his portfolio to basically represent today's prices. So I'm filming this on the 11th of November. So we're kind of combining the end of September share counts with the 11th of November prices. Hopefully that makes sense. But in terms of the cash position in Phil Town's portfolio, it currently sits at about $43.5 million. Now, Phil Town's entire sort of net assets with the assumptions that I just mentioned, the November prices and September share counts, is about $128 million. So about 43.5 of the 128 million currently sits in cash and money market funds and so on, which is still about a 34% allocation to cash. Now, in terms of the actual holdings in the portfolio, Phil Town currently has about 10 positions, and there were 6 changes in the portfolio. So quite a few of the positions did have some additions and some sales as well. So I'm just kind of going to start from the top with the largest position for Phil Town, which is currently Bank OZK, and it remains Bank OZK from the last quarterly update we had as well. So currently that's a little under a $20 million position, represents about 15% of the portfolio if you include the cash allocation and everything kind of in the pie as well. So that remains the largest position and absolutely no change in share count for Bank OZK. Next on the list we have CF Industries. Now CF Industries, if you don't know, is a nitrogen fertilizer manufacturer. It's currently about a $13.8 million position, about 11% of the portfolio for Phil Town. and this one was actually trimmed a little. So this one was trimmed down by about 25% in the last quarter, but again still remains about a 10 or 11% position. Next up we have Huntington Ingalls. No change in shareholding for Huntington Ingalls, represents about 6.7% of the portfolio, or about $8.5 million. Now, the next one on the list here is probably the stock that will interest people the most, and this is probably the biggest move that Philtown made during the last quarter, and that is an addition of, or an increase in shareholding of 67% in Alibaba. Now, last quarter we saw Philtown buy Alibaba for the first time, obviously following a lot of the other kind of super investors that have bought into Alibaba, Moshe Brai, Guy Spear, Charlie Munger, Bill Miller, a long list of other people. So last quarter, Alibaba was a position of 30,000 shares for the Rule 1 fund. That's been pushed up to 50,000 shares, or 50,000 ADRs, I should say. It's currently about an $8.1 million position at current prices, and represents about 6.4% of the portfolio. The next biggest position in the portfolio for Philtown is actually one that he also added to, which is Sprouts Farmers Market. About a 26% increase in the position there, or at least in the share count. $7.5 million position, and about 5.9% of the portfolio. Next on the list, we have three positions that had absolutely no change whatsoever. Firstly, Armada Hoffler, which is a REIT, real estate investment trust, about 5% of the portfolio. We have the Spider Gold ETF, which is one that's been in there again for a while for Philtown. No change at all there, 4.1% position, and also Sturm Ruger & Co. Again, no change in allocation to that one, represents about 3.5% of the portfolio. Next on the list, we have the Boeing company. Now, Boeing has decreased in holding about 61%, at least it was at the end of September now. So share count has dropped from 51,000 to 20,000. It's still about a 3% position. I actually found this one kind of interesting. Philtown has spoken about Boeing on his podcast, and I'm blanking a little bit on whether I heard this episode after the end of September. I think I may have. But he mentioned in that particular podcast episode that he'd completely sold out of Boeing. So although it's still showing as 20,000 shares in the portfolio here, I really wouldn't be surprised in the next update if that one completely disappears from the Rule 1 fund. So about a 61% reduction in shares for the Boeing company. Next up, we have Barrick Gold. No change in position on Barrick Gold, about a 2.4% position. We have a really substantial increase, at least in percentage terms, on the next one, which is iShares Silver Trust. Increase of 130%, but still only about a 2% position. And the only stock that Philtown completely sold out of, which is the last one on the list here, is actually Berkshire Hathaway, which is kind of an interesting one to see Philtown remove from the portfolio. So now obviously represents 0%, and that was the only stock that Philtown completely got rid of. Now, it's probably worth mentioning, at least very briefly, that there are three stocks that have previously been in the Rule 1 fund portfolio but have completely been sold out of in the past, which is Gildan Activewear, Ulta Beauty, and Sanderson Farms, which is a poultry producer. No change in any of those positions, so they remain completely sold out of, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. He hasn't bought back into those stocks or anything like that. Okay, so finally I just want to touch on Philtown's options portfolio and just talk through some of the options that he has written there. He currently has 2 put option positions, so if you don't know what a put option is, basically it's like an insurance contract, and Philtown is the sort of acting like the insurance company, I suppose. So he's writing these put options. Basically, he's saying that if a stock goes down to a certain price, I will be more than happy to buy those shares off you at that price. And in exchange for me making that promise to you and writing that put option, you're going to pay me a little bit of money up front. You're going to pay me a premium to write that put option. So if the share price never gets down to the strike price of that put option, Philtown basically just collects the cash and kind of that is what it is. If the strike price is met and the price goes down enough to where Philtown is forced to buy it, he of course still keeps that premium that he collected up front, but he has to then spend some of his cash in order to establish a position in those stocks. And I'm certainly no options expert, but at least as I understand it, Philtown's generally only writing options on, or particularly put options on, companies that he would like to own at that price anyway. So it's just kind of a way for him to get some extra premium and extra income into the portfolio and effectively reduce his cost basis when he actually buys into those stocks. Now, in terms of put options for the Rule 1 fund, we actually only have two companies or two put option contracts kind of showing up here. Firstly, we have Alibaba. So, Alibaba was sort of the most interesting bit of news, I guess, from my perspective in the core portfolio. So it's interesting to, again, see him write put options on Alibaba as well. Now, the exercise price is $105. So I know the price would have to fall fairly significantly from where it currently is at. I think it's about $160 today. But the expiration date on those is the 22nd of October 2021. So those have in fact already expired. So Philtown would have collected some put option kind of premiums on that. Now, the second company, or it's not really a company, but the second kind of put option contract that we see for the fund is actually on the S&P 500 index. Now, I don't know a huge amount about why Philtown would be doing that, but I do know that there's people who watch this channel who have a lot more options experience than me, so definitely drop it down in the comments if you have any theories on what Philtown's up to here. But the exercise price was $37.50 and expiration date was 15th of October. So the index, as far as I know at least, did not get down to $37.50. So again, a little bit like that first Alibaba put options contract, I suspect Philtown's collected some premium on that and was not forced to buy. And as well as the put options, we do actually have quite a number of call option contracts written in Philtown's portfolio as well. So these are going to be stocks that he does already own, and basically he would be willing to sell at the prices given in the portfolio here as well. So sort of the opposite of writing put options, he's now writing options on a stock that he already holds. He's again collecting some premium on that, and if they get up to a certain price, he would be more than happy to sell those shares to the person that he's written the contract to. So in terms of the stocks that are in here, we have Boeing. So that is one that he clearly has an intention to sell. I'll put again up on the screen here some dates and exercise prices and so on. And in terms of some of the other stocks that are showing up where he's written call options, we also have Sprouts Farmers Market, iShares Silver Trust, CF Industries, and Sturm Ruger & Co. And interestingly, all of these are quite short-term options contracts. They're all expiring in October 2021. So as of actually getting this update and then recording this video, all of these call option contracts have actually expired. I have seen some much longer-term options contracts show up for Philtown before. So it is interesting to see him modify things a little bit and really take much shorter-term option contracts. So that is it for me for this one, and that is our Rule 1 Fund portfolio update from Philtown. If you've got any thoughts on what Philtown is doing, definitely drop them down in the comments below. I'm always interested to hear that stuff. I really enjoy following some of my favorite investors and kind of seeing what they're up to. So I hope you did enjoy the video as well. If you did, please hit like and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But that's it for me for this one, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.